Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist and today we're doing some Laval test hands. So I'm really excited to do this for you guys because this was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Gloomba. And this deck is a really awesome old school deck that actually makes some insanely powerful synchro plays by reviving your monsters back from the graveyard with a extremely powerful spell card called Rekindling, which brings back a bunch of monsters back to our side of the field that can let us go into some really powerful synchro monsters. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell near the come part notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome awards like getting your name description on video, getting a signed card to mail, and even getting to request a deck profile every single month to your patron along with test hands. And definitely give Gloomba some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So this deck is a really fun deck that basically revolves around sending your copy or activating your copy of Rekindling and resolving this particular card to actually revive back all of the balls that you can particularly put on the field, and then going into some really awesome synchro plays. But you might be wondering, how am I actually going to get them into the graveyard? Well, there's a really powerful card that combos really well with Rekindling called Molten Conduction Field, which will actually send 2 Lavals to your graveyard right off the bat, which then you can use with Handmaiden to send additional ones, which we'll show you guys that combo if we don't draw it right off the bat. This deck is a really fun deck to play around with. It's very, very budget, and it's just an overall really, really good deck. I really love the way that it plays. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the way Synchrons play, but we're really quickly going to pile shuffle this deck, and we're going to see what we can do for our test hands, because this deck is really fun. And I'm really glad that Gloomba actually suggests this deck, because this deck was a deck that I had on my mind to actually profile and do test hands of for a very long time, but just all the other decks that I was doing, this one just kind of fell to the wayside. But it's a really fun deck. I really love the way that it plays, and I'm really glad that Gloomba actually suggested this one. So we're going to go ahead and see what we can do for our first couple of test hands, and let's go ahead and give the deck a quick little shuffle and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw, and we're going to draw into a copy of Form of Popper Up. This card helps us get our cards into the graveyard very quickly. Birth of the Prominence Flame. This is a recently new card that came out. Molten Conduction Field, a copy of Lava Lakeside Lady, and another Laval monster. So this is not too bad of a hand right off the bat at all, because we have plenty of ways to actually play this particular hand. You can actually right off the bat activate your copy of Molten Conduction Field, which is going to help us get monsters into the graveyard, like our copy of our Volcanic Handmaiden. Handmaiden's really good because she has the ability that if there's another Laval in your graveyard, you can send another Laval to the graveyard when she touches the grave. So for example, since both of these are being sent at the exact same time, you can send additional ones to the graveyard. So since we sent her to the graveyard, you're actually going to follow a line where these 2 will go to the graveyard right off the bat, and then we will go ahead and send a second copy of Handmaiden to the graveyard off the first one, and off the second one we're going to send the third one, basically stacking the graveyard in preparation of getting Rekindling. Now at this point, the final monsters you're going to send can kind of be different depending on what you want. You usually want to send at least you want to send a copy of a level 4 plus the copies of your Handmaidens to the graveyard. Then you can go ahead and send out a copy of either a level 4 monster, or you can send out our Landlord if you want to go for a level 7, which is a really good play to go for a level 7 because it's going to help you fix your hand a little bit. So after we do this, we're just going to send all of these to the graveyard, because the 2 original ones that we sent to the graveyard with this, she let us send another one, she let us send the other one, and then she finally let us send the last one to the graveyard because she lets us send any Laval monster from our deck to the graveyard. So all of these went to the graveyard, and now we have this hand. So you might be looking at this hand and going, wait, what can we do? Well, we have a couple of really good plays. We can actually use the Birth of the Prominence Flame to go into a synchro monster if we want to, which would help us out a lot to go into a synchro monster, because it has the ability that you can target 2 fire monsters, a tuner and a non-tuner, with 200 defense in your graveyard, banish them both, and if you special summon a fire synchro monster from your X deck whose total level equals the total level of those monsters. So let's just synchro summon using monsters from the graveyard. So, for example, we're going to use the level 6 Landlord and the level 5 or level 1 copy of Handmaiden, and we're going to banish these 2 from our graveyard to special summon out a copy of Salamander. So Salamander has a really awesome effect in this deck that basically, if it's synchro summon, you get to draw 2 cards, and if you have a fire monster in your hand, you send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard. If you don't, then you have to reveal your entire hand and shuffle it in the deck. But we don't have that problem because we have 2 fire monsters in our hand, but it helps us dig for our copy of Rekindling, which we actually hit. Wow, that actually is really helpful. So now we have to send fire monsters at least one fire monster and another card to the graveyard. So we're going to send our Lakeside Lady and a copy of Popper Up to the graveyard because we don't super need the copy of Popper Up. Now this hand is a really good hand to actually go in for some really amazing plays. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for these plays. So we're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Rekindling because we're going to go ahead and bring back our monsters from the graveyard because you want to bring back these 4 cards to go into some really cool plays. So we're going to summon out all these monsters back to our side of the field, and that's what the really awesome thing about this deck is you can go into some really powerful synchro plays with this setup. So right off the bat, you're going to go for a Synchro monster, and we're going to Synchro these 2 monsters away into the graveyard, and we're going to summon out a copy of Hyper Librarian. Hyper Librarian is always the one that you want to go for first, because it's going to let you get the most draws in this deck because of its effect that every time you Synchro summon, you get to draw a card, which is super helpful for this deck. We can then special summon out to our side of the field the copy of our Volcanic that's a level 2, and we can actually special summon out a copy of Needle Fiber because it just requires 2 monsters plus a tuner. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this card and this card off of our side of the field and special summon out our copy of Needle Fiber. Now the effect of Needle Fiber will let us special summon out from the deck a tuner monster to our side of the field, which is going to help us out a lot because we're just trying to get those monsters out of the deck. So we're going to special summon out level 3 Lakeside Lady from the deck, and then we're going to use its effect on the graveyard of our Archer, because Archer is just going to give us more plays. And we're going to pop on our side of the field the copy of our Lakeside Lady to special summon back our copy of Archer. Now for the rest of the turn after you activate this card's effect, it does lock you into fire, but that's totally fine because we've already gotten our setup, because it has the ability, if this card's in your graveyard, you can target a fire monster you control, destroy it, and if you do, special summon this card in defense position, but banish it when it leaves the field. Also, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn except for fire, which is fine because we're not going to go into anything but fire for the rest of the turn. So then we're going to Synchro Summon these 2 monsters away. This card will actually banish, and this card will go to the graveyard. And we're going to Special Summon out level 5 our copy of Laval Dragon. Laval Dragon or your copy of Dual Slasher. I probably would summon Dual Slasher because it has 200 defense right off the bat, because we're going to Synchro Summon this card away. Now since we have our copy of Hyper Librarian, we're going to get to draw a card, which is super helpful for us to actually get another card from the deck, because we can Special Summon this card out from our hand later on because we have 3 Lavals in our graveyard with different names, which is super helpful for this deck just to get those Lavals in the graveyard because we have 3 right there. So now that we've done this, we're going to go ahead and pass to the opponent, and we have a really good setup going here, because now at the beginning of their turn, we can actually get rid of the copy of Needle Fiber because it has the ability that it can basically quick effect banish this card you control to special summon a tuner synchro monster from your extra deck. So we're going to banish the copy of our Needle Fiber to special summon from the extra deck our copy of our Formula Synchron, which is going to let us draw a card, and it's going to just basically give us that extra draw. Now at this point, this card was actually summoned to our side of the field by the effect of Needle Fiber, and it's treated as a synchro summon, so you do get the draw off your copy of your Hyper Librarian as well. So we're going to draw into a copy of our Driver, which is not too great, but it's not too bad either. But at this point, you're actually going to use all of these monsters on your side of the field, because 5 plus 5 is 10, plus 2 is 12, and you're going to make a extremely powerful Cosmic Blazar Dragon, which is super helpful for this deck because this card is nasty. I love this card in this deck as a boss monster to summon during your opponent's turn with that combo, and that was actually pretty much the combo that I was talking about for the deck. The only thing that it could have changed is if I would have gone ahead and had the Rekindling in the opening hand. But what this card basically does is it must be synchro summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. You can banish this card during the end phase to activate one of these effects, or banish this card until the end phase to activate one of these effects. That your opponent activates a card or effect, negate the activation if you do destroy it. When your opponent would special summon a monster or summon any monsters, negate the summon if you do destroy that card or the monsters that they're attempting to summon. And when an opponent's monster declares an attack, negate the attack and in the battle phase. This card is very, very, very powerful to be able to summon to your side of the field, and it's just a really good card overall. Usually you summon this card, and sometimes your opponent will just straight up scoop, which is hilarious because this card is just so strong. So that'll do it for their turn. We go back to our turn after this card has banished itself and come back, and we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Resonator Call. We're going to use that copy of Resonator Call to dig into the deck, and we're going to grab our copy of our red Resonator because we're trying to thin the deck a little bit to go for another copy of Rekindling. Now that we shuffle up that deck, we can actually use the copy of our Popper Up in our hand as long as we have around 3,000 life points or more. We have to have more than 3,000 life points. Activate the copy of Popper Up, send this, and our copy of our Volcanic Tuner monster from our hand to the graveyard, and we're actually going to get to draw 3 cards because we sent 3 cards, but we take 3,000 points of damage, which is not too bad because we actually got some really good draws out of that. So we're going to use the copy of Molten Conduction Field because we're just going to try and get some more monsters in the graveyard. So while we're going into the deck, I would probably send to the graveyard a copy of Blaster at this point and maybe Cannoneer just to get them into the graveyard so I don't draw into them. It's totally fine because you're trying to basically thin through the deck just so you can get to your copies of your Rekindling even faster at this point. So at this point, you can just go ahead and normal summon the copy of Red Resonator, use the effect of Red Resonator to special summon out your copy of Archer, and then also special summon out the copy of our other monster of the level 2. Now that you have this, I see an 8 synchro on my side of the field. I don't know about you guys, but basically what you're going to do is you're going to synchro these 2 monsters together right here. And we're going to summon out a copy of Laval Dragon. This card is really good in the deck because what you're going to do with this card is it actually lets you search Laval and then send a Laval from your hand to the graveyard. So we're going to search a copy of Blaster, and then we're going to send the copy of Blaster to the graveyard. Then we're going to go ahead and synchro these 2 monsters together, which this is actually an upgraded version of this card if you look at the artwork really close. And we're going to go ahead and send these 2 monsters to the graveyard to summon out our really powerful X-Lord. X-Lord is a really awesome card in this deck. So now that you've got this set up, you have some really good cards to be able to go into, to be able to just basically go in for game, because you have the X-Lord that's a walking gate, and if it gets destroyed, you get special summon Laval monsters that are non-synchros from the graveyard. You have Cosmic Blazar Dragon, and if you draw into a copy of Rekindling, you're going to get some insane plays, which you have cards to back up that copy of Rekindling anyways, which is just going to help us out a lot because you have so many different cards in the graveyard that have 200 defense, and this is how fast the deck plays if you actually draw into the Rekindling. So that's pretty much it for this test hand. Let's go ahead and do another one and reset the hands and see what we can do. As you guys can see, this deck is very good. The only problem is that we don't have a Rekindling Searcher and we don't have a way to get to Molten Conduction Field outside of hard drawing it. So you do run into some hands in this deck where you just kind of have a problem where you can only go into 1 or 2 synchro monsters. For example, in that last hand, if I wouldn't have used the Salamander and drawn into the copy of my Rekindling, we probably would have just stopped at the Salamander, and that would have been about it for that turn, which is okay. You can still go into follow-up plays during the following turn. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck really quick. I'm going to give it a really good shuffle because those were really like all stuck together with those copies of Handmaiden and then all those other cards. If you guys want to check out the deck profile, you can down in the description down below. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Psyframe Gear Gamma, a copy of Red Resonator, Form Pound Popper Up, Molten Conduction Field, and a Reinforcements of the Army. So we're kind of set up a little bit where we were before, but the nice thing is we have a Gamma, so if our opponent ashes us, we're at least guaranteed a Synchro or a Link play. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Molten Conduction Field because we really want this to go through, and the copy of Gamma is pretty much going to guarantee that we're going to get it to go through. So once you use the copy of Molten Conduction Field, we're going to go ahead and activate it, and we're going to activate the copy of Gamma because usually your opponent's going to respond to this. If they know you're playing Lavals, they know this is the key card that they're going to want to hit. So we're going to go ahead and activate the copy of Molten Conduction Field. So once we activate that card, we're going to get to special summon out from the deck a copy of our driver. Now I'm showing you guys maximum potential for this actual setup because I want to show you exactly what the deck can do. So we're going to go ahead and send the copy of our Volcanic Handmaiden. We're going to send a copy of Cannoneer to the graveyard. And once that copy of the Volcanic Handmaiden touches the graveyard, you get to send another Volcanic from your deck to the graveyard, which would be another copy of our, or not Volcanic, but a Laval. So we're going to send another copy of Handmaiden and another copy of Handmaiden off the last one, and then finally a copy of Archer this time instead, because at this point you can go in, if we draw into another copy of Rekindling, you can go in for some really insane plays. So now that we've sent these cards to the graveyard, it's going to help us out a lot. We're going to go ahead and use the copy of Reinforcements of the Army. And Reinforcements of the Army is going to let us search any warrior monster from the deck, which we haven't normal summoned this turn. So you can use cards like your Blaster, but we've already had Molten Conduction Field, so you don't have to grab that. You could actually grab your copy of Boost Warrior if you wanted to grab Boost Warrior, because it's going to give us a special summon. Or you can send it to the graveyard for other effects, which is going to help us out a lot with that copy of Popper Up, because we do want to draw more cards in this deck. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck, and hopefully hit something with that Popper Up. I don't know if we will or we won't, but it is a good chance that we will. I don't know. The deck is getting quite thin here. So let's go ahead and see what we can actually draw into. So we're going to use the copy of Popper Up. If we don't draw anything, that's okay, because we do have these two monsters on the field, which is what's really good. And the reason I actually play Gamma and Driver, because you can actually go in for a copy of Needle Fiber after that, special summon out another copy of a tuner monster, normal summon this, special summon this, and then we can go in for some plays, because we do play a level 3 Synchro monster in the deck in the form Metal Marcher, which get us into some plays in the deck. Or you can actually use the copy of your Red Resonator plus your copy of your Driver to go into a copy of your X-Lord if you want. Well, you have to go in with a Fire monster, so you couldn't go in for that, but you could go in for some other plays. So we're going to use Popper Up, and we're going to send these two monsters to the graveyard that we had in our hand, because our hand consisted of these 3 cards. Once we send these to the graveyard, we're going to draw the top 2 cards of our deck and hope that we hit something. And we're going to hit a Lakeside Lady and a Rekindling. Oh my god, that's really good. So we're going to go ahead and Destiny draw out that copy of Rekindling. And then at this point, you can go ahead and synchro these two monsters away, or actually link summon these two monsters away for a copy of Needle Fiber, just to kind of unclog your zones, because it's going to help you out to unclog those zones. Use the effect of your Needle Fiber to actually special summon from the deck another monster. It doesn't super matter what it is at this point, because you're going to get some crazy plays. You're going to special summon out this card from the deck, which is just going to help us out a little bit. Or you could actually summon the Lakeside Lady from the deck. It doesn't super matter at this point, because you've got some really insanely powerful plays. We haven't even normal summoned yet this turn. We just used the copy of Driver, and we have the Lakeside Lady in our hand. So at this point, you're going to use the copy of Rekindling. Rekindling is going to special summon back to our side of the field a couple of Laval monsters. So we're going to special summon out our copy of Archer, a copy of Handmaiden, another copy of Handmaiden, and a copy of our Cannoneer. So once we special summon out these, we're going to do kind of the same thing. We're going to synchro these two away. We're going to summon out our Hyper Librarian. We're going to synchro these two away, and we're going to summon out a copy of another monster, which is going to be our copy of Laval Dragon or Dual Slasher. I usually go for the Dual Slasher if I'm going first, because it has 200 defense, and I can revive it back with another Rekindling. And then at this point, you can use the copy of our Librarian to draw a card, which we're going to hit a copy of Gamma, which is pretty good to hit a copy of Gamma, because we have backup plays if we do get board wiped. So at this point, you can actually synchro these two monsters together away if you want to, but if you do that, you're actually going to mess up the combo a little bit, because you're not going to have a way to go for your copy of Blazar. So what we're going to do is normal summon out the copy of Lakeside Lady, and we're actually going to pop the copy of Lakeside Lady on our side of the field for a copy of Archer that's in the graveyard. Now we can only go in for fire for the rest of the turn, but again, that's totally fine. We're just going to go ahead and use these two together and actually banish that copy of Archer to special summon out from the deck a copy of Salamander. And the copy of Salamander will let us draw 2 cards, and hopefully we will hit a fire monster. But we play a bunch of fire monsters in the deck, but we have milled a bunch of them. I don't know if we'll hit one, but let's see. So we're going to go ahead and cut the deck and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw, and we're going to hit a copy of Blaster, thank goodness, and a copy of Foolish Burial. So we actually have to discard 2 cards from our hand. So I'm going to send these 2 to the graveyard, and I actually have that copy of Foolish Burial to activate now. And we're going to send from our deck to the graveyard another Laval Archer, because now we have an additional special summon if we need it. And if we draw into another copy of Rekindling, we're going to get some really good plays. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle that deck up. And now that we have this set up, we're going to go ahead and pass over to the opponent. And we get to draw when Salamander was summoned as well off the Hyper Librarian, which I actually forgot. So we're not going to worry about that. And we're going to go ahead and pass to the opponent. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of this copy of Hulk, and we're going to go summon out a copy of our Formula Synchron, which will get a draw 2. I will put another card in the hand face down just to represent what it was, and we're going to draw 2 more cards, which is Birth of the Prominence Flame. If we did draw, it'd be a copy of Popper Up, which wouldn't even be that big of a deal when we summon the Salamander, because we didn't draw off the copy of Salamander. So we're just going to put that in the hand to represent that we did get it. So we're going to go ahead and go in for all 3 of these monsters together. and we're going to summon out a copy of Blazar Dragon, which is really good that we actually get to summon this card again because it's just such a good card. So when we pass back over to the opponent and they pass back to us, we're going to go ahead and draw. I don't even believe we have another Resonator in the deck. I got to double check the graveyard because I think we used both of them that I play. We used one right there. No, I've only used one. So I can actually use the copy of Resonator Call in my hand to dig into the deck to grab another copy of a Resonator, because it's just going to help us out overall. Now at this point you have a little bit of a choice if you want to use the copy of the Birth of the Prominence Flame, or you can actually just go ahead and just swing with this. It's kind of up to you what you do. I would probably use the copy of the Birth of the Prominence Flame because it's going to get you more play. So at this point you can actually banish cards from the graveyard that have 2 under defense. So we're going to hit the copy of Slasher at this point, and we're going to go ahead and send the copy of Lakeside Lady to make a level 8 because we need that copy of X-Lord on our side of the field. And we're going to go ahead and special summon him out to our side of the field to give us that additional negation. And then we can use the copy of Popper Up to actually ditch 2 cards from our hand to be able to draw 2, which is going to help us out a lot, which is we're going to get a Molten Conduction Field and a copy of the Laval level 2. Activate the copy of Molten Conduction Field because we're going to send 2 more from our deck to the graveyard just to thin the deck again. Send these 2 to the graveyard. It doesn't super matter what we send at this point, but we're going to send these 2 to the graveyard, and once we do, we can then go in for attacking with these cards. So after that, we're going to go into the next turn. If we didn't win, we're going to draw into a copy of Blaster. You can special summon this card out to your side of the field, normal summon this one, and then if you really want to be gutsy, you can actually mill 5 off the top of your deck, which if you do, you're going to hit your last 2 copies of Rekindling. So just showing you guys, I'm not going to do that, but we're going to go ahead and synchro these 2 away during the following turn and go into the copy of Dragon on our side of the field, which is pretty good for a setup. Now, this did take 3 turns to set up, but that's totally fine because we opened up with the Blazar Dragon during the beginning of our opponent's turn, so it's not a bad test hand at all. Let's go ahead and do one quick draw hand just to show you guys what the deck can do and go ahead and see, because I love to do 3 in a video for you guys if I can. So let's go ahead and do a really quick one and see what we can draw into, because those 2 first ones were actually pretty good test hands because we ended up getting the Rekindling and the Molten Conduction Field. It's really hard to actually pull that off every single time. Like, it sometimes will happen where you'll just draw it and they like are really good cards together. Sometimes you'll draw into the copy of Blaster plus a copy of a Rekindling, which is really good, but it takes a little bit more setup to go into. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the last one. So we're going to go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Archer, Blaster, Rhoda, a copy of Foolish Burial, and a copy of Lakeside Lady. So at this point, you have some okay plays to do. It's not as crazy as our other hands, but we can still go in for some plays. We're going to activate the copy of Rhoda, and when we activate the copy of Rhoda, we're going to get to grab a copy of, say, Boost Warrior, because it's going to be able to get us another monster, and it's going to help us out just a little bit. So at this point, you're going to activate the copy of Foolish Burial, and once we activate that copy of Foolish Burial, we're going to get to send a Laval monster from our deck to the graveyard. I'm actually going to send a copy of Archer to the graveyard because I just want to get that monster out of the way and into the graveyard and see what we can do. So at this point, you have this really interesting hand. You could normal summon out the copy of Lakeside Lady and then special summon out the Boost Warrior, or you could set up a kind of interesting board where you could normal summon out the copy of Archer and then normal summon out the copy of Lakeside Lady and then special summon out the Boost Warrior to get us into some really neat plays, because you could synchro these 2 away for a copy of our Salamander. So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and summon out the Salamander to our side of the field because you need a level 7 to summon this card out. And it's going to let us draw 2 cards off the top of the deck and hope that it is something that can mill. And it's a Prominence Flame and a Laval Archer. So this is what I was talking about, guys, that sometimes you won't draw into the Rekindling every single time, but you still have some plays that you can go in for later on, which is totally fine, but you won't be able to go any further with this particular hand. But you will have to send 2 cards from your hand to the graveyard, so I'm going to send these 2 monsters from my hand to the graveyard, and then basically you pass against the opponent. So once you go ahead and pass the opponent, they're probably going to board wipe you, and you're going to go in for the next draw, which hopefully, if it's Rekindling, we're okay. If it's not, we've kind of got still a Birth of Prominence Flame. So we're going to draw into a copy of the Laval level 2, which is not going to help us out that much. You can special summon it to your side of the field. And then in the graveyard, we can go for a 7 if we have a 7. I don't think we have another 7 in the extra deck. We don't have a 2 in the deck, so we can't really go for all that much in plays. So you kind of go to this point and you get a really weird hand where you kind of have a bust, which is okay. That's just something to show you guys as you're playing with this deck. You don't have a level 1 tuner monster in the graveyard. You can go for a 10 because these are 10. You can go for a 7, but we don't play another 7 that's a fire. So you kind of just go into a hand like this. But you can do a really neat play where you actually pop this on your side of the field to summon back the archer just to get it in the graveyard, then activate this in your hand to be able to then use your copy of your level. Actually, you can't even use that because it has to be a 200 defense. So at that point, you just have the archer on your side of the field and you can't go any further. So that's to show you guys what happens if the deck does brick. You do have a little, when it breaks hard, to be honest, which is just something that you kind of learn with the territory of the deck. But it doesn't happen all that often, as you guys can see. You still get some really crazy plays and you still get some really, really fun like strategies where you can actually summon out your copy of Blazar. So that's actually going to do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much, Gloomba, for suggesting this deck. This deck was a blast to play, as you guys can see. I really look forward to them giving this deck more support because we got Salamander and Salamander was really good. We got X-Lord. X-Lord was fantastic and a step in the right direction for this deck, giving it a negation, and it's just an overall really fun deck to play. So anyways, guys, this is Dark Arm Duels. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell there so you can become part of the notification squad. And if you guys want to check out the deck profile, it is down there in the description down below, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.